Welcome to Meet the Author, where you can join in on insightful conversations with best-selling and award-winning indie published authors. Your hosts today are Rob and Joan, who themselves are indie published authors, book publicists, and paranormal investigators with Tampa Bay Spirits, based in Tampa Bay, Florida. Thanks for dropping by. And now, on with the show.
Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Joan. Thank you for being in the audience, whether you're watching us live or you're watching us later on, or if you're listening to us on audio. We're really, really glad that you decided to be part of our audience tonight.
Indeed.
And I want to apologize for you if you had trouble getting into Facebook. It's been every week.
Rocky starts.
And we've talked to StreamYard. I'm not sure what else we can do about it. We then have to take it off and put it back on. So just stick in there if that happens to you. Hello, DG McCool.
Hello, Del.
It says, let's get the party started. Let's do that. Joe Conchel says, hi, Rob and Joan. Hello,
hey, Joe.
Yes.
Got in no issue. Wow.
You got in with no issue. Yeah, that was after we had restored it.
No, they know who you are.
They know they shouldn't mess with you.
Send them.
Marjorie Deering. Hello, Marjorie. Hi, how are you? Glad to see you here this week. I'm glad you had time to spend time with your great-grandchildren, though. That was good.
Well, I want to remind everybody, Thursday night, 9 o'clock. That's tomorrow night, 9 o'clock. If you go to www.djyfm.com, you can listen to our shows there. Or if you're in the Atlanta area, dial up 99.1 FM on the radio. And that's the north side of Atlanta area.
Okay. Marjorie said, I hunted for you a little. Yeah. Each week, Marjorie, we're having trouble with our Meet the Author Facebook and the WLFE DB Facebook page.
Both the Facebook stream.
Both the Facebooks are not streaming at first. We have to remove it from the stream and then put it back on the stream. We've talked to StreamYard about it, and they don't know what to do.
Anyway, hopefully someday it'll get
Paul
fixed.
Hollis says, hello, Rob and Joan. Hello,
Hey,
Paul. We're glad that you're here. Joe Conchel said, we're having another thunderstorm just like last week, LOL. We had one all day today, yeah. Joe, and all day we've had a tornado watch. So that's that time of year.
It certainly is. Continuing.
Marjorie said, that's all right. I'm persistent. I know you are. I'm glad you are.
That's a good thing. Next Saturday, or every Saturday, 5:30 p.m., episode rewind. You can catch our episodes there. 5:30 p.m., that's Eastern time. And then next Wednesday, right here at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Meet the Author Live, we'll have author Aaron Ryan. And let's see, in the news, we need everybody to go to allauthor.com and vote for A Chance of a Ghost. You want to show them the cover? The Chance of a Ghost is our book, of course, and it's in the cover contest. We're in the third round. This is getting ridiculous.
There's going to be another round.
There's at least one more round. I'm hoping it's the last one, but we'll be down to only, I think, 24 covers at that point. So far at this point, today we edged back up into first place, so I don't know. We've got 5 more days on this round. But we still need your votes, so go to allauthor.com, go to the contest tab, and do the drop down and do cover of the month voting and click there. And you'll have all the covers right in front of you. Paul Hollis voted. I saw that you did. I can see who votes.
And vote again in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Joe Conchel said, I'm having a premonition that you will win the cover contest.
I hope you're right.
I hope you're right. We came in second, though, in the second round. Now, we were first in the first round.
Yeah.
We'll see.
They beat us up by 3 or 4.
Yeah, but Crispian did such an awesome job on that cover.
He did a great job on that cover.
You know.
Also, in the news, this coming Saturday, Tampa, anybody in the Tampa Bay area, please come to the Gilded Page Bookstore and say hi. We're going to be there with 3 other authors, Sandy Will, Steve Altier, and R.J. Eastwood.
Yeah.
All of them have been on our show. And we're all going to get together there Saturday, May 18th from 1 to 4 p.m. So come on down and say
Tarpon Springs.
Tarpon Springs, Florida.
Has good food there.
They do. And good coffee shops too, that I hear.
Good coffee shops and bakeries and lots of good Greek food there. Paul Hollis said he voted 4 times. Yay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Michael Sanchez says, hello there. Happy to you all again. Happy to see you all again. We're happy to see you too, Michael.
All right. Have we monkeyed around enough?
Yeah. Okay. Let's bring on Judith.
Well, hopefully Judith hasn't left.
I know. All this nonsense.
Just like, I've had it with these people and I'm out of here. Anyway, let's bring her up. Hey, Judith.
Hello.
All the way from sunny California.
Far away from you as I could be geographically and still be in the country, I think.
There you go.
I believe that you're right. We're on opposite coasts.
That's right. Coast to coast.
I'm pretty sure you're right.
So this is a coast to coast show.
Well, you could be in Hawaii or Alaska.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're in the far south and I'm in the up in the north. So we're kind of, if you see it as a large rectangle, we're covering some territory here.
It's a contiguous United States.
You're about as far away as you can get. Yeah. That's true. Yes. I had meant to tell you before the show that we've been having issues with the Facebook, but I forgot to mention it. Anyway, I don't know. It's StreamYard's problem, not ours, but I'd like them to fix it. We're supposed to be able to broadcast over like 8 or 9 different channels, and we're having trouble with.
We cut 2 of them.
6. We cut 2 off to see if it would stop the issue, but it didn't.
Anyway, enough of our trials and tribulations.
Right. Let's talk about you.
Yes. All right, we're going to turn the show over to you.
Why don't you tell us what kind of books you write and why you write them, and have you always written your whole life? Just tell us all those things.
I write historical fantasy set in the ancient world. The series that I just now have published, Flights of Treason, the 4th book in the series, which brings the series to a nice close. So if you're one of those readers who only start a series when it's complete, jump on board. The first one in the series is called Priestess of Ashana. There it is. Great job. And then there are 2 in the middle, Sorcery in Alpara and Of Kings and Griffins and Flights of Treason. So they are all set in the inspired by the Hittite Empire. I do the combination of history and fantasy. Came about because the Priestess of Ashana, my main character, who is a queen eventually, but she's primarily a priestess in the beginning, she believes in a lot of what we would call and think of as magic. And at a certain point, as I was writing, I thought, what if what she believes could happen happened? And boy, that is so much more fun than being irrational. No, that couldn't be. So, and then as I explored that, I expanded the magical qualities of it, following this pattern of rules that the Hittite beliefs as the groundwork. So, for example, they believe in creating harmony between all the different levels of the worlds and life, and everything is about balance and harmony. So I use that as a principle of building the magical system within the series. So, but I also have this world building that is grounded in this ancient culture that not very many people know about. It's not easily accessed. We didn't know really anything about it. It was the Lost Empire. It was the time period, by the way, is the same as like Ramses II was her big foe. And that's the Moses guy. So that 13th century BCE, way back there, long ago. And it was a kingdom that when all these big Bronze Age empires collapsed, most of them we know about, like Babylon and the Egyptians and all that, but the Hittites just somehow, it was partly a prejudice against all things Ottoman Empire. I mean, when the great beginnings of archaeology and exploration were happening, that was clearly couldn't be a place where anything interesting was coming. I think there was that prejudice to some extent. I don't know exactly how much that entered into it, but I think that was part of it. And then a few intrepid travelers said, what are all these rock carvings and what's this stuff all over what's now Turkey, all over Anatolia? And gradually, slowly, it began to get explored. And first, they had no idea that it was 13th century. They thought it was 5th century BCE. They thought it was classical. Who knows? It took them a long time. And then there are these huge libraries of cuneiform tablets that they had to decipher and translate. And now we actually know, if you read enough and explore it enough and study it enough, we know enough about this world that I can do a pretty good job of accurately creating the buildings and the clothing and the food and the smells and all that stuff that goes into wonderful world building. So that's kind of the long answer. And no, I didn't always want to write. I took on this later in life.
That's sounds fascinating. I mean, right up my alley, because, you know, I've been woo-woo my whole life like that. Joe Conchel said, love the covers. Yeah, they really.
I do too. Heather Center is the cover artist, and she is great. And I suspect there's probably some FBI file on me, because when she's sending me the covers, I'll say, well, can we take that arm off or the head? And I mean, you know, we've decapitated people. And then she'll say, oh, and where do you want the magic? Shall I throw it here? It's like, you know.
George Dismuke says, I'm here. Sorry I'm late. I've been making salsa. I spilled some and it burned a hole in the floor.
Oh, pretty strong stuff there, George. That's funny.
You're a funny guy, George. So what kind of, let me look at this cover again. I like this. Is this the same person as?
Yes, that is Tesha, who is the main character of the series. And I should say, on this final cover, it's very difficult to get a griffin is a mythological creature. There's
right.
And they're part lion and part eagle. And in my series, they are like the size of buildings. So proportionately, that cover is inaccurate. But in order to have a main character that you can see on a thumbnail and a griffin, they kind of have to be similarly sized. So, you know, cover art always has some imperfections in terms of reality or matching the book, just because it has to be an instant thing that you just look at and you get an idea and you love it. And her covers do that beautifully. So no problem with that whatsoever. But yeah, those griffins are she makes those covers by combining, you know, parts of different photographs and getting a lion to look like it can fly and not just sort of, so it has to be like dropping down, or, you know, we played a lot with making that work. It was not easy. See, that first one, we had him standing because that way we avoided that whole issue.
Griffins is that they have the fore in a lot of the there, you know, there are different viewpoints on what griffins look like. But
in the medieval ones, the ones that are like on the coats of arms, they have little claw, like they're more bird than mine are super feline. And the ones that are all over the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East that are the inspiration for my novels that are contemporaneous with my characters, they are these feline ones. But a lot of times they're a lot daintier. So like on Crete at the Palace of Knossos, I mean, I was joking last night. I had my book launch at the local bookstore, And I was joking that they kind of look like they should be at Versailles or something, that, they're going to appear in Louis XIV's, court or something, because they're very dainty and sort of. Mine are not like that. Mine are really, they are warrior beasts, but they're also telepathic. So they communicate in a much more, sophisticated way than you or I do. They're just really, they view us as somewhat pathetic that way. And they think writing is just hilarious. Like, why would you take so long to express something when all you need to do is think it? And it comes packed with the emotions and everything. Boof, So it's fun to have them. I had a great time developing a whole mythology of how in the past they'd interacted with human beings and what their role is and why they need one human being in particular, a character in the series. So they come in gradually.
I think we should all communicate that way. I think we should do that.
Wouldn't it be great? Yeah.
Yes, it would be much simpler, but then people wouldn't need books. So maybe we'll wait on that.
Yeah, wait a little while anyway.
Yeah.
We got some comments here. Michael Sanchez said, yeah, that Spanish salsa would do it, make a hole in the floor. But then he said about your books, sounds like an interesting series. Yes, it does.
I hope you will give it a try.
Absolutely, yes. Buy some books. Marjorie Deering said, photo editing is so much fun. She certainly does a great job. She does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they look like paintings by the time she's done. I mean, they're really, I have no idea how to do that. I mean, I leave all the graphics to other people. I can paste up a little thing on Canva when I have to for, here or there, but I can paint with words.
They're really beautiful. Joy Shelton York says, sorry, I'm late. Hi, Joy. We're glad you're here. June Augusta Gillum. I hope I'm saying it. Do you know her?
No.
Okay.
But yes, they are warrior beasts. And I have to warn you, they view human beings primarily as something good to nibble on, like snack. So there's a very tense relationship. They happen to need some human interaction for a reason that I won't reveal, but that you don't get them crabby, let's just say.
Okay. Beth Riley Gregory says, I made it. Better late than never, I guess. I'm glad that you're here, Beth. That's great.
I bet Les is hiding behind there too.
I bet he is too.
Somewhere.
Joe Conjal says, now that you've completed this series, will you begin another? If so, will it be the same genre?
Well, I'm actually going to do a mythic retelling. You know how there have been all of these wonderful novels. My first novel actually was a novel set in the Trojan War. So using mythology and Homer. And I'm taking a myth that precedes the Trojan War, but is about Achilles. But I write fiction with women at the center. And this is, it's actually the woman that Achilles interacts with, who again is will be the center of this novel. But it's often a comic. This myth is often dealt with as sort of comedy because it's when his mother's a goddess and she's trying to hide him so he won't go off to the Trojan War, and she dresses him up like a girl and hides him in the women's quarters of this little kingdom. Well, that's just like, haha, funny, like, dressing up and you'd get caught and all that nonsense. Of course, the princess ends up pregnant. I have a slightly different take. I did not know this was going to be my take. When you write, the characters tell you things that you didn't know before you started writing. Mm-hmm. And I've always thought of this Achilles and this Thetis, his mother and all, are consistent with those of the novel that I've already written. That's like an afterword to this one. So I already knew that Thetis was not very good at understanding human feelings. And she is kind of a bull in a china cabinet in some ways as a, she's not a person, but as a being. And she doesn't get how profoundly disturbing to a teenage boy, not that they had teenagers really in the ancient world, but very young, he's like 13, 14. If she just hides him by temporarily transforming him into a woman.
Just for a little while.
Temporarily.
Just
Yeah,
a little-
yeah.
Just for a minute. Take a little break.
Just for a few years, dear. Don't worry, right?
Don't worry.
You'll be fine. Right. She doesn't even consider that might how I mean, we now know a lot about
It might harm them a little bit. Yeah.
you think, right? You know, your identity, if it doesn't match the body you're in, is a very troublesome thing.
Very upsetting thing.
Yeah.
That is actually only a sort of I mean, it's a very important strand in the novel, but it's actually about this woman, this very similarly aged, you know, young woman, girl, whatever. But how as she interacts with him, she has this whole arc of her own that I didn't know what it was going to be at all, and I'm still getting there. But once I realized who she was, I was like, oh, I have to write a novel about you. You are really interesting, and the way that Achilles and his very fractured sort of personality, who messes with your world, like how that interaction leaves its imprint on you, is really interesting. And she ends up having to make a hugely impossible decision towards the ends of her life involving motherhood. So that's the short version. So
Cool. We're going to need to take a break shortly, but let's get caught up on our comments here.
June Augusta Gillum said, sorry, I'm late too. That's okay. DG McCool said, okay, got book 1 to 4 Atesha's series on Kindle. I love books for this region.
Oh, good. Yeah.
He just bought them. Now,
that is music to my ears, and I'm thrilled that you like books set in this region. That's great.
June says you do know her as Debbie.
Oh, June, I met you last night.
Judith.
I am so sorry. I am terrible at names, and June should have rung a bell. I was looking.
Yeah, her name is actually.
No, she's her friend.
Okay. And then she said, sorry, I can't see what I'm writing. And then she said, send 200 stars to see your comments. No, I think.
You don't have to do that. I don't know. I've seen that on there, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah. You don't have to send 200 stars. What happens?
Our sponsors. They cost.
Yes. Okay. Just a minute. We'll do it. I want her to know that we are broadcasting on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different channels. So you're not going to see the comments on anybody else's comments except for on the Facebook page that you're on. And we're on more than one Facebook page.
Right. So we're going to take our first break. It's very short, 3 minutes. Nobody go away. We've got a lot to talk about here. And we'll be right back, folks.
It's every parent's worst nightmare. Police officer Madison Jackson awakes to discover her baby kidnapped from her crib. Was it revenge for someone she arrested, or something far more sinister? Madison's estranged husband is incarcerated in Supermax. As the second in command of a deadly Mexican cartel, did he issue the order to abduct their daughter? Bye, Baby, Bye, from author Kelly Marshall. Get your copy today.
Many secrets are hidden within the darkness of the jungle. Now comes part 4 in the Jaguar series by retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. In this saga, Brandon, Andrea, and Naja, the Black Jaguar, go deep into the Mato Grosso jungle on a mission to rescue 2 kidnapped children. During their journey, they encounter many dangers, including Yanomami Indians, bent on revenge for the murder of one of their warriors.
Return of the Jaguar is book 4 in the Jaguar series, starting with 2 faces of the Jaguar, the Lost City, and the Jaguar's Quest. All 4 are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other bookseller websites worldwide. Return of the Jaguar is a must-read.
The clock is ticking. Can Gracie uncover the truth?
Philip Pliant is the wealthy opportunist plastics dealer and CEO of Pliant Industries. He's also a master thief, creating a pervasive threat to the manufacturing infrastructure in the Caribbean islands markets. With the cartel as his stealth client, the naive city leaders have been seduced, enabling the production of more than three-dimensional building materials.
The expected profits are monstrous.
Is the art group, now led by Gracie and the family heirs, strong enough to win against this predator?
Can JJ's cats act on the root cause analysis in time?
Will Gracie be able to squash Pliant and the cartels?
Gracie never considered their lives would hang in the balance. The clock is ticking. 5, 4, 3.
And we're back. So June says, that's what shows up on Facebook about the 200 stars. Yeah, don't worry about it. You don't have to do that.
And thank you so much, June, for tuning in. That is lovely of you. I enjoyed meeting you last night.
And Robert White says, hi all from down under. How you doing, Robert? Hope you're feeling well. Okay. So Joe Conjal said, with the amount of times I comment, I'd go broke if I had to send 200 stars every time, LOL. June says, now move to YouTube from Facebook. Fascinating to be on so many platforms. I know.
Can't get away from it.
We used to have more. And Beth said, I think it's to pin your comment so people can see it.
Could be.
And you have to do that on YouTube too, or people can't see it, but it doesn't cost anything. And Angela.
Oh, hey, Angela.
Hello, Angela. How are you doing? Angela Mina Hankins is here again. Good to see you. All right. Okay. Oh my goodness. Sorry, that was a few comments to go through.
Now that we're back and we've had our first break, would you be interested in reading something?
Sure. Let me explain that the passage I'm going to read.
Hold on just for a minute.
Okay.
Robert White is recovering from surgery. So I'm sorry about that. My gosh, you've had a hard. He had his leg amputated earlier this year. I know. Whew. Okay, go ahead. Let's let you read.
So I'm going to read from very close to the end of Flights of Treason. And so that it is in no way a spoiler, I will insert her ally, Tesha, the main character you will hear. She is at this point, the whole series, the main character, Tesha, starts out reluctantly using magic. It's a forbidden thing in her world, and she does not know much about it. She's a priestess, so there are certain allowed things that magical things that she does and learns. And she's already delved outwards from that because she's very curious and smart and, slightly driven. But by the time we're in this fourth series, she hits a point where she really does not want anything to do with her magic. It has nearly cost her the life of her daughter, but she must embrace it eventually. So this is the very end. She is there. There is an enemy. There's a whole battlefield in front of her. This is just a very magical piece of it. So there's a Bronze Age war going on, but there are also sorcerers on both sides. So it's a multi-leveled battle. And she has an ally, and I'm not naming that ally. I will just call it the ally sorcerer. So it sounds slightly strange when you read, but that's why I'm explaining. And then there is the enemy, and I do not include his name because you also do not want to know that. And he is a demon sorcerer. So that explains so that it makes sense. I will read from close to the end of Flights of Treason. With a shared look and nod, the two sorcerers fired off their dual magics aimed at the coils of snake rearing up from the roof edge of a 4-story tenement. At Tesha's side, her sorcerer ally swayed and his knees quivered. A twisting blast of wind wrenched their enemy, but the serpent held steady, raising his hooded eyes and flicking his black tongue, so that Tesha felt the full surge of his magic directed at her. The air she drew in choked her with the texture and smell of ash. She closed her eyes and imagined her own magic clearing her airways, shoving back this polluted power. With Tesha's gaze freshly directed at the demon, an even more powerful wind gusted from her fingertips and lashed against the scaled coils. Darkness once again flickered across her vision, and she pressed her palms forward with all her magic, feeling the ally at her side doing the same, so that the demon sorcerer flew off the roof. Adding as much force to his fall as they could, they slammed the writhing serpent onto the cobbled street. The giant snake lay broken, its head resting sideways, one glazed eye staring unseeingly upward. Clots of red spattered the rough surfaces of street and mud brick walls around him. Like tree branches stripped by a storm, his thick coils had crashed into tortured rents and ruptures. To her blind sister, Daniti, Tesha called out, "He's down!" Tesha gave her ally a cautious look. She saw the same question in his eyes. Had they finished off the fiend? She asked, "Do you have strength left to send another attack?" "Possibly. A killing blow in case? Should we shape it like a spear to his head?" Tesha waved her finger at the single visible eye. "We'll aim for that eye socket." Then she searched inside herself for any reservoir of power she could still throw into this blow. She drew up what she could, felt her heart race alarmingly as she spun in more magic. Her strength was giving way. She nodded, and together they shot out a sorcerer's spear. But before their glowing weapon reached the demon sorcerer, the mangled loops of scales tightened back into coils, smoothing each break into rippling vigor, raising the battered head so that it dodged their lethal point. With unbelievable speed, his myriad wounds smoothed over as if they had never existed. Grounded on the bloodied street, the serpent demon rose higher than any of the buildings around him. His scales expanded and took on an iridescent sheen of sorcerous strength. He scorched the air with the glare from his hooded eyes and each flick of his poisonous tongue. Tesha felt a hovering moment, a respite from attack, granted to her while her enemy completed his restoration. Or was it more than that? Was he transforming into something even greater? Either way, she knew the pause would not last long.
That was excellent. Really wonderful.
Very, very good.
Well, thank you.
Really good. And I'm sure Marjorie Deering says, great reading, Judith.
Well, thank you.
Yes, it was. Joy Shelton York says, powerful. It was really powerful and well written too. Why did you decide to write? And, when did you first decide to write?
I've always liked telling stories. I mean, I told them to my children. My father was a great storyteller. He was also a historian, like I am, different period. He was an American historian. So I think I always associated storytelling somehow with the gathering knowledge of history. And that is the model that I guess by osmosis grew up with it, and that's what I used. But I didn't actually, I taught for years and years. I don't think I would have had the mental space or energy to write fiction while I was grading stacks of English essays and humanities essays and et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So
right.
I started writing much later after I quit. And it was a question about a mythological character that got me started. I had always wondered why Briseis in the Iliad, she's the woman that Achilles and Agamemnon, these two Greek kings, fight over. She gets virtually no lines in the poem. And Achilles withdraws because he's so offended that she gets taken away from him. And Agamemnon, the king, is a full-on jerk, as much as you could possibly be as a ruler. So, all right, the one thing we know about her is that she goes from, when she's taken away from Achilles, she goes all unwillingly. And the implication is that she loves him, that somehow she has grown really fond of this person, which I was always like, I don't get this, because he killed her father and her, not her father, her husband and her brothers, and, made her a slave. She was a princess, a queen. Excuse me, like where could there ever be forgiveness for all of that, such that you are fond of somebody? So I wanted to figure out who Achilles was and who Briseis was. And my answer ended up taking me into this archaeology and this history of this place and time, which I thought I really knew after, I did write a dissertation. I was really grounded in this academically, and then I had taught this forever. But it turned out that the archaeology of the Hittites, and that's who the Trojans really were, which when I was in grad school, that was not what we thought. It's really interesting. We think of somehow the ancient history, everybody's known it, there would be no changes. It is the fastest changing area of historical understanding that we have. We're re-examining things like slavery in America and all those things, but we are getting huge amounts of new data on what the ancient world looked like, and particularly this one corner of it, Anatolia, what's now Turkey, Syria, Lebanon. That whole big expanse of land was this empire that got forgotten. And as I say, there are actually documents from it that are being translated. And I found this kind of priestess, a healing priestess. She would be literate. She was very active in the community. And Achilles, in the legend, is also a healer. He's the best warrior, but he's also the healer. And I gradually understood Achilles rather differently than he's usually depicted. He's usually like the big brute, the one who's so selfish he withdraws from war because somebody took his girlfriend, like he's trivialized. And I have to say that lots of people, when they read Hand of Fire, which is my Troy book, if you enjoyed Song of Achilles or any of those, go read Hand of Fire. I have a rather different Achilles. He's not the jerk, and he has a very fractured personality because he's part immortal and he's part human, and that's a very uncomfortable mix. Immortals don't get what it means to be human because they never die. There's no need for meaning, and if you don't work at it, meaning's hard. That's the job we have to do every day, striving to figure out, why does life mean something, and what is that meaning, and how do we define that? And so if you're only partly that and then partly this other thing, you're a mental case in a lot of, that's an uncomfortable. He is always these funny combinations, which is ironic. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm writing this mythic retelling, and another fragment of split and
Right.
discordance in his personality.
In a different way, but
yeah, and I think that's why it came to me, because I was just really accustomed to him being a person who's straddling discordant sides and not doing a very good job of it, but still grasping at how to join those and be a whole person. So anyway, I started writing that, and I discovered that I was a really, I could critique literature, I could teach literature, but writing a good book is a whole different thing. So it took me a lot of years That book went through so many drafts and, hundreds of thousands of words pitched overboard in the process over many years. But that's where I started. And then in the process, I discovered the Hittites and this queen who ruled for decades. And I was like, whoa, that woman, she should be a household name like Elizabeth I. She's very similar to Elizabeth I. She's not the Virgin Queen. She's famously married in a happy marriage and all that. But she ruled in a very patriarchal, very male-dominated world. And yet no one ever doubted who was in charge.
Good. Joe Conjal said, loved it. Wonderful reading.
Well, thank you.
DG, I'm just going to call you Del. I know that you go by DG McCool Jr. for Del says, keeps the listener focused. And June said, Briseis. And Robert White, speaking of Achilles, I'm sure, said he's on the Brute Squad. He is the Brute Squad. June says she needs to read The Hand of Fire. And Joe says, Judith, you have such passion for your writing. It's inspiring.
Well, thank you.
And you do. You have a passion for your subject. And that's awesome.
Yeah, they're alive and around me all the time.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I really do.
Well,
yes.
Speaking of alive and around us, our sponsors are saying, hey, you didn't take your break yet. So we're going to break here for another short 3 minutes. And when we come back, we got some more to talk about, and we'll let everybody know where to reach you. Okay.
All right.
So stand by. Don't go away, folks.
An unforgettable mystery thriller that will transport you back to 17th century England. Introducing Dream of Courage, facing fear head on, your passport to 17th century mystery, mayhem, and murder. Follow Robert and John Rushworth through Leeds' bustling Brigade district, where danger lurks in the shadows, embodied by the thief-taker Jacob Wilding. You will laugh, you will cry, and be in awe of the twists and turns. Its meticulous attention to character development, emotional nuance, and the unfolding of the story's layers promise a compelling and emotionally charged journey. The U.S. National Times said, modern writers usually don't know what it was like to live in the past, but Rushworth Brown does this with great skill. Uncover the secrets of Smythe, the enigmatic tavern keeper who sends Robert to the Haven, to the pirate Captain Girlington. Will he outweed danger in the nick of time?
It's 1919, and Eric Laska returns from the war in Europe. Two new enemies await him in the small, coal-mining town he calls home. One is a threat to his relationship with Rebecca, the love of his life. The other, a bloodthirsty beast, is stalking the mining town residents. The townspeople suspect Eric of one of the killings. An old man and Rebecca's 11-year-old sister have seen the beast, but only Eric believes their story. To protect the town and clear his name, he's forced to prove the werewolf exists. Available on Amazon. The Horror Within by Marjorie Swift Doring.
Paradise, my prison. Charlie Flint awakens from a deep sleep and finds himself alone on a tropical beach surrounded by a palm tree jungle and exotic animals. He cannot remember who he is or anything about his life. First, he must find food and build shelter and protect himself from hidden dangers. As his memory gradually returns, it reveals what a very flawed person he is. A man who made too many mistakes, made too many enemies. The implications of the truth are staggering. How did Charlie get there? And will he save himself? Paradise, My Prison is the riveting new suspense thriller from retired Hollywood scriptwriter George Dismukes. Paradise, My Prison by George Dismukes is available in jacketed hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats worldwide.
And then we're back.
Howdy.
And Dell says, okay, I added Hand of Fire to my Kindle collection just now. The Homer-based stories are some of my favorite in school. So you bought 5 of your books while listening.
You're my new favorite person. Thank you.
Well, speaking of that, why don't we tell everybody how to reach?
Yes, I will bring that right up so that people can reach you. All right. Here's Judith's website. It's judithstarkston.com. That's JUDITHSTARKSTON.com. And you can find all of her social media connections on there. And also, I believe you have a newsletter that people can sign up for, right?
Yes, and they'll get a free novella that's Griffin, all Griffins. So
that's cool.
Did you hear
yes,
that, Tom?
very fun.
That's cool.
That really is very cool.
Yeah.
To get the free novella. I think that's helps to increase your newsletter to give somebody something.
You know, what do they call it? A cookie? You know, like give somebody a cookie. Yeah. And I enjoyed writing the novella and having a piece of fiction that has no human beings in it. As we said, my Griffins communicate telepathically. So there's plenty of emotional nuance and complications and all of that. But it is entirely in their realm.
We have a lot going on in the neighborhood today. I think someone was just taken away in an ambulance earlier and just again. Yeah.
Sorry, Doggy doesn't like that.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't like it either.
Tell us, how has your publishing journey been? Have you had a lot of problems or anything you'd like to share about that?
Well, I mean, I had a long, when I wrote Hand of Fire first, I, sent out to, that was quite a while ago. It was before indie publishing was really, it was very nascent at that point. And I sent out to agents, and I found that process, it's depressing because you mostly get rejections, but
yeah,
no matter what, and I was getting frustrating ones because they would say, oh, we like this little they always have you send a chapter or whatever, and they would really like it. And then they would ask for the whole thing. And then they would, no. Okay. And usually whenever somebody said no, I would send back and say, can you give me a sentence or just a phrase? Tell me what you would like fixed, like So I took those, a couple years of rejection letters and turned them into kind of a master course in how to write fiction that was marketable from the point of view of agents, like that was compelling to them, which was a completely different audience than me, me, myself, and I, and my critique group that I have always enjoyed. That was just, my little round table of people. And I would rewrite entire manuscripts. At one point I was told dialogue stiff. That was the entire response I got. And she was right. She was a really smart agent, and she was absolutely right. I was in the very early stages of learning how to write, and dialogue is, for a lot of people, that's the easy thing. For me, it is the hard thing to really, I think partly because I tend to speak in rather elaborate sentences. I mean, I grew up listening to this very Victorian sounding historian father, and I don't think that my dialogue always sounds like regular people talk. And then there's the complication of making them sound like they're in the Bronze Age, and they're speaking English, even though they would be speaking some other language. So all those complications, it took me a lot of practice to, and I read a lot of really good historical fiction and historical fantasy, and watched how people do it and how they make their dialogue work. And then I thought, okay, apply this to my fiction and my world, and tried it and played around with it. How do you make a king sound different than a slave? What do you do? And I came up with answers for all of that and reworked it. So publishing, that part of publishing was frustrating, but also productive. And I think if people approach that stage that way, like I'm just going to learn as I get rejected, and I know that I'm going to get rejected because you just do, and it doesn't have any reflection of you in a lot of ways. And then I published Hand of Fire with a small press. They were very up and coming. It was great. I was very happy. And then they kind of changed gears and they stopped deciding that marketing was something they needed to do and things like that. It was just a little less sustaining as a place. I ended up getting my manuscript, my rights back, and published it myself. And meanwhile, I had gotten a really wonderful agent, sort of legendary, wonderful agent, who turns out thought Hittites were the best thing ever. We happened to be both teaching he was the keynote speaker and I was one of the faculty at a writers conference. And he said, I want to represent you. So he took this manuscript. By that time I was writing this Hittite series, and it went through lots of iterations and went to, it started out as historical mystery. And then I grew into this whole notion of it as fantasy, and he liked that idea. And I took time to rewrite it that way. And by the time, Priestess was in the form that it is now, editors loved it and they really wanted it, but they kept saying, it's a really small market. So if we take it, it's this, it was clear to me that what was going to happen is what I had seen so many of my writer friends happen. They get it published. It's the first of a series, and then they don't sell enough because, this is a niche market. Let me tell you, selling Hittite novels is not an easy project. It's not recognizable to very many people. So they were right that it was small. And I just, at a certain point, it happened to be the year that I was going through cancer. And I was like, what will give me joy in life? And it was not to be told, yeah, I know you like this queen, you're really into this history thing, but we're sorry. We're dumping your series and you got no control over book one, and we're just not publishing it anymore. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I just told my agent, you know what, give it to me. And we parted as very good friends. I mean, he's actually, I believe he's retired, but it was entirely amicable decision. And I have never regretted that. And I do, because I started as a teacher, a lot of what I do as a part of my writer journey now is that I do a lot of teaching how to write and how to rip fiction apart and figure out how you can make yours better, and do all of that process. So that's all of that arc for myself. That was part struggle, but also intellectually and emotionally, really, I was happy to be in the weeds of it and doing that. So not an unhappy process, but certainly no easy road.
Right. I think a lot of people see the finished product. They see the beautiful covers, and they see, you being very articulate and everything, but they don't really know how much blood, sweat, and tears and years it took to get to that point. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, I would never try and design my own cover. I don't do that. That isn't my skill. In the same way, although I'm a very good editor, I would never be the only person who edited my books. I would, I hire somebody, and then I at this point have a whole, group of friends that, some one of them will be ready to read a manuscript when I need it read, and we'll exchange. So there are stages, but you can't do it alone. I don't know. There are people who say, oh no, I never get critique. I never, it's like, okay, don't know how you do that. Not my style.
Beta readers are really helpful because you're in your own head. And so you know what you know, and you know what you're trying to say. So to have somebody else that isn't in your head that reads it and says, this isn't clear.
Yeah.
You know what you're trying to get across, but it's not coming across to the reader. And it's really helpful to have somebody tell you that. And what are you talking about? I don't get this part. Or
I'm not persuaded that this person would behave that way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah. And I mean, anyone who's ever watched any TV series knows that you just get so angry because they build a character to be a certain way and then they have them acting in a different way. And you're like, that doesn't even make any sense. And it really is offensive to you.
And no matter how much you try and keep a character, like there's times where you think, oh, the plot needs to go here, and you get lulled into the sense. And a lot of times, you need somebody else to say, no, and sometimes it's the characters themselves in your imagination. They show you that it's not working. But sometimes you need that trusty, fellow critique partner.
Take 1 second here to say good night to all the listeners on WDJY 99.1 FM in Atlanta. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you here. We hope you'll listen to us again next week.
Yes, they won't see us.
No, they won't see
us.
us.
On an FM radio station. The rest of you can stay. You don't have to go anywhere. We just needed to cut that off. Otherwise, when it's produced for that FM station, it gets very funny endings if we don't end it. It just gets cut
Middle
off
of a
in
word somewhere.
weird places. So that's not good. But yes, you do need somebody that's standing outside of you to do that.
Yeah.
Michael says, great show. It's not over, Michael.
It's not
it was
over
just
yet.
over for
Got a few more minutes.
It's just over for the FM station. We just have to cut off early.
Oh,
he
you
has
got
to
to
go.
go. Okay.
Well,
in that case.
Thanks for tuning in. So glad that you did.
Yeah.
And
good to see you.
Have a good night. Yeah. Yes. And you're right about sometimes your characters just decide to go a different direction, and they wander off into places you didn't intend to go. The two ghosts that are in our latest book, A Chance of a Ghost, really took over huge parts of the story. We didn't intend it to go there, but it did. We liked it. June says, yes, fun to discover this show. Good, June. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. We have really wonderful authors every Wednesday night. And a lot of these people here that are speaking are authors themselves, the ones that are commenting. So we all understand, Judith, your language. We're right there with you. But isn't it now, after all of that and sending out the manuscripts and being rejected so many times, when you publish your first book and the first case of books comes to your house and you take it out, isn't it the most wonderful thing ever?
It's pretty darn exciting. It is. And I have to say, even now, I mean, this is my 5th novel that's just coming out, and it's still really fun to launch a new book out, and you put a lot into them, and there they are. And I have to say that I really love the way they look, like the feel. And I'm very careful. I mean, one of the things that saddened me when Hand of Fire first came out, the earliest, the small press edition, at the very last minute, they changed, instead of the format they had shown me and that I had done in galleys, they squished everything into smaller margins, and, like they dropped the page count so that it would be cheaper to publish. And it was ugly. It was just ugly, and to me that, what a tragedy, no, a book should have a certain, when you open it, should be some white space so your eyes have some resting place. And, it should just be beautiful and gracious and not, let's save some money here, That's not the place to save trees and money, sorry. It will sit on my shelf a long time. I'll get full worth out of all those pages.
Joe Conjal says, Judith, do you have any good marketing tips?
Oh, goodness.
Whoops.
I mean, I guess one of the things that I've been doing this time around is lots of podcasts, because as you notice, I don't mind talking. I'm comfortable doing that. And it's fairly, it's a way of putting passion out there, like in a really direct way, so people know, oh, she might write a good book because, I can feel that. And I knew that that's something that when I meet with people. So that's fun, if that's your thing. But I haven't tested whether it will sell a lot of books. I don't know. And I think getting the word out about books is the hardest thing, because there's just so many books published now. And
actually is part of a group that we belong to. And it's called the Underground Authors. And we're writing a series together, the Magnolia Bluff series. So each person writes one book a year. This is our first year. And Joe just said something funny. Sorry. He said, you sold 5 books tonight, so it must work.
I know. I'm really impressed. You've made my.
Don't you love our audience?
I do love your audience. Yeah. I have to say, not only that, but when I've done these podcasts, frequently the podcaster, the hosts, before I go on, they've read all my books, and it's like, whoa, you are, like, that's a lot of time investment. I would not expect that. Like, you guys couldn't possibly do that, doing a show every week. They're typically people who aren't always doing books. They're doing, occasionally. And they happen to say, ooh, your books are exactly what I have been looking to read. So, all right, I got lucky there. But yeah, marketing is perpetually challenging.
It is. It's hard to know what to do all the time.
Yeah. And there's all those boring things like building Amazon ads and all of that. And I don't know. I don't know that there's a secret. There's certainly no one thing. I just try and
magic bullet.
No.
Hollis is in the audience tonight, and he's an author of the Hollow Man series, and he also is a publisher, and a small, private publisher. And he's always saying that there's 32 million books on Amazon now. When we all started writing, well, when Paul and we did, there were only, I think there was 1 million books on Amazon. Now there's 32 million. That is
there was too many then.
How you get through, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Robert White said, if you make a reference to Ghostbusters and Hittites, you might get another range of readers.
There you go.
You somehow put them both in.
Put a time portal in there or something.
Yeah, who knows?
When you were talking, I was wondering, where is Göbekli Tepe? Isn't that
that's in this empire, but that is way earlier in time.
Yes.
That is, what it's Chalcolithic. So, and the thing that's kind of amazing about that site, I mean, it's got these big carved pillars with animals and these big rings of clearly some kind of gathering space, whether it's, people are always like, must be a temple. It's like, not really clear. We don't know. This was clearly a place where a lot of people came together. Yeah. And how did you feed a whole lot of people? And I mean, this is before agriculture. I mean, it's the beginnings of agriculture.
What we thought was the beginnings of agriculture.
Right. And then now that's moving back a ways.
Yes.
And so, I mean, and we are finding grain in one of the things that, when I reconstruct foods for my novels, I'm often using like DNA profiles of a hearth, like what foods were cooked there, as well as things like linear B tablets and stuff that will have like what was stored in the palace and things like that. But we know that Chalcolithic site had grains that were made into breads, and the assumption was they were wild gathered, and that's possible. But there do seem to be some agriculture. But the thing is, we thought that Göbekli Tepe. I'm getting the
Göbekli Tepe.
Tepe. Yeah, all right, I was right. It's like Turkish is tricky.
Say.
Yeah,
we thought that was like the one-off. now, have you read, there's this whole region with them all over the place. Why there? Why that place? On my website each week, I have a little blog post, and I don't know, a month ago or so, one of my recent blog posts was about how many places there are, how amazing they are, so if you're a history buff, you can sign up for my author newsletter. That's my novels. But if you're interested in history, then you sign up for my weekly blogs and that kind of thing. Because, what is going on there?
I thought, that it probably would be part of the same kingdom as the Hittites, just because.
No, it's a millennium. It's way, way further back in time.
Oh, and I know. And it's
almost never do I get to say that. I mean, most people's, they say, oh, I write ancient world. And I say, oh, and they go, oh yeah, Romans. And I'm like, ugh, that's modern. That's modern compared to me. I'm 13th century.
I love Göbekli Tepe, and I love what they've discovered there. And I love that they've discovered more. And I love that they have to keep pushing back what we think we knew when we didn't know it. There's a lot of evidence that it goes even back further than Göbekli Tepe, which is kind of like,
there's even like the earliest dates for things like making wine of going way back now.
Way back.
We were as a species, we were pulling off a lot of complicated, interesting things. And wine as a reason, like the relationship between beverages that soothe you, right? Whether they're wine or beer, or whether it's, other kinds of food substances that alter your mind, that when you've got a whole lot of people who are for the first time in history living close together and having to deal with, all those, that's an interesting notion, like the relationship between communal living and beverages of soothing sorts, shall we say.
Yes.
But the Bronze Age world that I write about, which it's like like Hattusha, this big archaeological site that was the capital. It was probably a way more comfortable city than a medieval city. I mean, they had these paved streets. There was water running through through pipes. It's not like you could turn a spigot on and off and that kind of thing, but they had fresh water through the city. In that reading I did four-story tenements, and somebody said to me last night in the my book launch, they said there were 4-story buildings. I went, well, they're kind of these stepped back, they're flat roof stepped back with ladders, kind of like a Hopi, a Navajo or Hopi pueblo. But although the palaces had internal staircases and multiple stories, and we know like the big throne room at the Capitol has, I can't remember how many, it's like 4 rows of pillars holding up the set story above it, and being held up. There's basements below it. I mean, they were building really complex, huge spaces. Their fortification walls are like 4 guys, arms stretched out, arm to arm wide, double casement walls. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. My world building is all very historical. The fantasy and the magic is a great deal of fun, but the world, I don't need to go into fantasy to get the world to be.
Yes, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it's just
so George
and all the major events in this queen's life, I don't break those. Like, I make my series plot follow what happened.
Those actual things. Yes. And then just throw in the fantasy and magic for fun.
Right.
Cleopatra was the world's first herpetologist, George Snoop says.
George.
And George is funny. And then Robert White says, bad grapes, I'll drink it. Wild grapes, we'll drink it. I really do think it's fascinating, everything that we're finding, and we just keep finding more and keep digging more and unearthing more. It does. It's really amazing. And I I think that we don't give enough credence to how civilized those civilizations were and how advanced they were. I mean, they knew a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and they had big libraries, and I mean, they certainly didn't have literacy across all levels, but there were, there were very learned class of people, and my queen is one of them.
When you think about it, we don't have literacy across all levels either.
No, that is very sadly true. But, the other thing is we think of women's rights as somehow progressing over time. The Hittite women had more legal rights in terms of like divorce and children, keeping hold of your children and owning property. This queen carried on being the ruler after her husband died. I mean, they appointed another king also, but she wasn't dependent. She wasn't consort. She wasn't like secondary. She just carried on. You compare that to, say, a Victorian woman who was just chattel. I mean, she had no property, no ownership of her own body, nothing.
Couldn't even read the newspaper.
No.
DG says, thanks for the website link. Signed up for both the newsletter and the blog.
Well, Del, you are clearly, coming on board. I'm going to have to look at your fiction.
Yeah, his is good too.
Ready. No.
So which is older, beer or wine? We know that the Egyptians invented beer more than 5,000 years ago for practical purposes. George, that is an excellent question. And I am pretty sure that beer precedes wine. Because beer is like super easy accidental fermentation project. But I have a friend who could give us that answer right like that and be right. So I could be wrong. But there in Iran, there is a mountain where they're in a cave, and then they're even earlier than that. That is no longer. That used to be the earliest, and as I recall, there's an even earlier one. But whenever I see articles about these topics, I do like beer and wine, ancient world as topics. So I find that one of the things about wine that's interesting in the ancient world, I'm drawing a blank on the name of the site, but there's a site in Israel where they found all these wine amphora, ceramic containers, and it turns out they put all these different spices into wine, and juniper berries and things like that. Like wines had cinnamon and flavorings and all of that. So very different. Like we try and imagine what it was like to live there, but it might be different. Like each thing we learn, you have to adjust. And the Hittites had big straws, these big metal straws that they drank their beer with, because there'd be all the floaty stuff. And we think they were filters, that it was a way of filtering it. But also then they could have this big pot of beer and everyone would have these super long straws. I mean, it looks like Slurpee, gone mad. And on these paintings, you have like 3 or 4 people sitting around a giant pot of beer with straws. It's hilarious. Yeah, I have to say that's one of those details I've never written into my books because no one would believe me. They'd think I just made it up. But plus there it is.
It's gross.
It is a little gross, yes.
Beer on the first date and wine later, LOL. And George Dismukes said they had to brew beer to get them over the hump every spring when Kilimanjaro was thawing. Water in the Nile was undrinkable. Water stored in amphoras made people sick. Brewing beer solved that problem. Interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah. Everybody drinking out of one thing with straws.
I know it's the germ, but they didn't have germ theory, so
that's where the saying "this is the last straw" came from.
Except they all had one, so there wasn't a last one, and they were metal. We assume they were metal. Maybe they were really long reeds, but I'm pretty sure they must have been metal. Yeah, but we don't know.
Yeah. So they'd have dueling straws.
That is strange.
Oh boy.
I mean, yeah. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe. So to me, it's just like, okay.
You get one joker
really?
blowing bubbles.
But I don't use that, and I don't even put straws because I just think it's just sounds too I mean, there's things that will break, that throw a reader out, even though it's the historical, and you're always balancing. So mine drink in cups, but
Good point.
Breakfast is cheese and flatbread and beer. It's not like beer was nutrition.
George says it gave a whole new meaning to the phrase party. Everybody having one's, their own the big beer bowl.
Yeah, there we go.
That's really odd. I didn't know that. I'm trying to think if I've seen any, if I've seen that someplace, because if you really like watching all of looking at all of the stone carvings and everything, and I find all that fascinating.
There's certain seal, those cylinder seals that they then roll out across the clay. Yes. Sometimes they're on that. So those are very tiny. You have to look very carefully and you'll see a little group. And sometimes they're on larger carvings. It's clearly like a feast day thing. So, if there's like sometimes they'll have big pots with rows of different scenes from a festival day. So there'll be musicians, acrobatics, and there'll be people drinking out of these things in one of them, and others carrying driving the sheep to be slaughtered and that kind of thing. So
Robert White made a good point. At least the turtles would have been safe with metal straws.
That's true.
Yes, that's true. No straws floating around, no plastic. We are definitely a long way away.
Dell has to go. He enjoyed the show, but he has to leave.
Yeah,
well, thank you. You are I think my number one fan today. So I thank you.
George says they have found amphores of beer as well as licorice candy in Royal Egyptian tombs. Admittedly, the beer is a little bit stale.
But the licorice.
Yeah, mostly it's just they analyze the residue on the sides. I'm not sure they found actual liquid, but they know it was beer and wine. They have found wine too. Yeah.
June said, enjoyed the show. Need to sign off now.
Well, thank you, June. I'll see you around and about town.
And we'll see you next week, hopefully.
Hopefully. Well, she said she would be.
Yeah. Anyway, we should
probably sign off.
So
I know it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. Your books look fascinating and your covers are wonderful.
And
amazing.
You're right,
you should be proud of them.
Possibly read everybody's books before they came on.
No.
We're gonna.
I would not expect you to
finish up some of these comments.
Okay.
And let's see.
So Joe says, Joe says, super interesting show tonight. Thank you, Judith. And of course, Robin Joan. Thank you, Joe. Angela said, enjoying. That's you, good. Angela. We're so glad that you could make it tonight. Joy said, great show. Very interesting. Great to have you here, Joy. Paula Hollis said, great show as always. Thanks, Robin Joan and Judith. Thanks, Paul. And Angela says, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we want to remind everybody to tune in to WDJYFM.com. Tomorrow night, I believe it's Laura Vasica, her episode. And if you're in the Atlanta area, dial up 99.1 FM. Saturdays, episode Rewind, 5:30 p.m. And Wednesdays, next Wednesday will be Aaron Ryan. And I guess we'll be looking at you next week.
And Angela said, I appreciate the variety. Thanks, Angela. We do too.
We do too.
And all of our authors so far have been wonderful. And we've been doing this for 3 years and it's never been boring. So
not yet.
We always meet fascinating people.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess until next time.
That's all, folks.
That's all, folks. See ya.
Live every Wednesday, your Voice of Indie hosts Beam Weeks and Stephen Gees welcome authors, musicians, publishing industry pros, artists, and assorted creative guests for an exciting interactive hour. Call in during the show or post questions and comments on Twitter for responses in real time. Meet your favorite indie creators, learn inside tips, network, and promote your work. The link for each week's show is pinned on Twitter atop @VoiceOfIndie, and you can receive the link every Wednesday morning in your inbox by subscribing to our newsletter at freshinkgroup.com. Check out Voice of Indie every Wednesday on Blog Talk Radio and catch hundreds of episodes archived everywhere from our websites to our YouTube channel and Spotify.
Thank you for joining us here on Meet the Author. Make sure you stay up to date with our show by clicking like, follow, and share. And you can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and more. See you next time on WLFE-DV.com.